Welcome everyone to PLRB's Get to Know PLRB webinar, featuring this time around our liability and auto products and services. My name is Jeff Kerensky, and presenting with me today is Pat Biggins, who is a liability and auto coverage attorney and counsel with PLRB. We will be doing a PowerPoint of what products and services are available in this department. And then from there, Pat will take over and go live and demonstrate how you can find many of these things using our website. At the end, we will have a question and answer session. I wanted to mention that we have two types of membership: property and a liability, which also includes auto. So this webinar is focusing on the liability and auto materials. So you may or may not have access to this depending on what memberships your company has. So let's jump right into who we are real quick. PLRB is a nonprofit trade association. We are controlled by our membership. We provide training and education, claims information, and each member company pays a flat fee. That's it. There are no additional costs. So to the extent that Pat and I go over things today that you say, hey, that could really help me in my job, take full advantage of it, because there literally are no additional costs or charges that you could possibly incur by using our services. You, as a member, you have unlimited access to everything we go over today. So these are all of our departments that we have, but this particular webinar is going to focus, as I mentioned, on our liability department. And by the way, the liability department includes everything auto, even physical damage, first party auto stuff. So that's the focus of today's meeting, but I will briefly discuss a few of the other departments and how they apply to casualty and auto adjusters. We've been having monthly webinars highlighting each and every department. So they have all been recorded. So if for some reason you want to learn more about any of these other departments and their products and services, you can go to our homepage and click on the recording, and there will be a 45-minute to 1 hour discussion of what each department offers. So let's jump right in to the coverage database. For you liability and auto adjusters, we have policy annotations. We literally have written a chapter on every single policy provision, be it a peril or a exclusion or a condition or a definition, and it's filled with case law, and it's updated on a real-time basis. So it's not like it's some stale thing from 5 or 10 years ago. It contains cases from all over the country as well. And you can do a search in our database. Pat will be demonstrating shortly how to access our annotations, but we have them both personal auto as well as commercial auto and garage policy for all you auto folks, and UIM, PIP, things like that. And for casualty adjusters, you can also get into liability things such as homeowners and CGL. We also have a state-by-state series of almost 100 different common coverage issues. For example, auto diminished value and indemnity statutes, and Pat again will address those, showing you where you can specifically get those. But it's a nice way of honing in on your particular state. And then emerging issues, we have lots of things dealing with hot topics. And the reason why these are important is because sometimes as an adjuster, you are forced to handle claims where there frankly isn't case law yet out there because they're just new issues. And so PLRB will write articles on these issues and help you recognize what the coverage issues might be or other issues, so that you kind of have at least some guidance along the way. And then we also have coverage questions. We receive lots of coverage questions, thousands of them every year, and we take the ones that are the newest or most unique set of facts that we haven't addressed before, and we sanitize them so there is no insured name or insurance company name, and we put our coverage responses in the database so you can see if other people have dealt with a similar issue that you might be currently handling. We have also a team of coverage attorneys They are only coverage attorneys. In other words, it's if you submit a question, you will not get a paralegal. You will get an attorney. And they respond to all coverage questions within 5 business days. Often they can respond more quickly depending on the complexity of the question. And their coverage opinions include questions such as determining whether there's a duty to defend. For example, in a multi-count lawsuit, they can go count by count and tell you whether any of them trigger a duty to defend. And again, you have unlimited access to all of this and no additional costs. Another thing that the coverage attorneys offer is form review. So this is something that perhaps underwriting is particularly uses this feature. So if you're modifying a form or coming out with a new endorsement, you can send it to us and we will look to the form for any possible conflicting language, ambiguities, overlapping issues. Maybe there's a grammatical issue with wrong punctuation that could change what the intent was. So we'll work with you and try and point out any problems. That way there won't be any surprises when you go to file your form and actually use it. Case reviews. So we write hundreds of cases every year. We write summaries about them. And these court opinions sometimes can be 30 plus pages long and quite frankly pretty dry. So we cut to the chase with a 1-paragraph in brief summary about what that case stands for. We remove all kinds of legalese, legal language, and we use terms like policyholder and insurance company or carrier. And then we have a comment section at the end of the summary where we will tell you what we think about the case, because you shouldn't just look at one case in a vacuum. You need to know, is this case in the majority view or the minority view? You don't want to be surprised if you have a case that you rely on and then the other side says, yes, but what about these 3 other cases? So our case reviews are really a nice place to not only know what the court said, but what other courts on similar topics have held. Our law reviews, as I mentioned, this is kind of an example of one. We often have a link that will take you to the actual court opinion if for some reason you want to read the whole thing. And the links are available if we have access to a free website. In other words, we don't link you to anything where you would be charged to access that court opinion. An example of, I mentioned emerging issues, COVID. So we have a COVID page, and we have on the liability side a document that highlights what all the potential liability coverage issues could be in handling COVID claims. In addition, we have COVID-specific bulletins, so you can click on your state and see whether or not your state has anything. For example, some states required auto carriers to reduce their premiums for auto insurance during a time when offices were closed and people were driving less. So things like that, you could just go to our COVID page, and again, Pat will demonstrate shortly how to find a number of these things. And these things are updated on a real-time basis. We have committees of our member companies that advise us on things that they're struggling with or things they'd like to see us do. And so most recently, the liability department has developed materials on e-scooters and e-bikes, home sharing activities, public livery exclusion, which has been a big thing now with Uber Eats and DoorDash and things like that, and then the professional services exclusion. They've also added 50 state surveys on extrinsic evidence to determine duty to defend, as well as more COVID information. So that is a summary of the liability or legal department. And I'm just going to quickly now do a quick run through of some of the other departments, just 1 minute on each one, because the focus on this webinar today is really on the liability and auto legal coverage materials. But a lot of times casualty adjusters or auto adjusters tend to overlook some of the other departments, thinking they're just for the property adjusters, which is really not true. For example, building code. We have a building code department, and you can submit a building code question to our staff. And imagine if you have a slip and fall claim, and in that slip and fall, they allege that your property owner failed to have adequate handrails or failed to have the steps were too steep, or they didn't have anti-tread material. So those are the types of things where, as a liability adjuster, you might want to find out whether or not your insured was supposed to have those things, or was there a grandfather clause where they were exempt. So we can help you find that information. Our education department. Our education department is not just for property folks. We have well over 85 CE approved online distance learning courses. You can take them 24/7. And many of them are either auto or casualty related. We also have a training curriculum, so you can actually get a casualty certificate after you complete certain online modules. And we have lots of webinars, especially during COVID. We have really ramped up the offerings, and they used to be just monthly. Now we have them, multiple ones each month. And we record them so that if you miss a live webinar, you can always go back and listen. We have a number of ones coming up on liability, negotiation strategies and bodily injury claims, and emerging issues and third-party bad faith claims are just some of the ones available. And again, Pat will show you how you can sign up for those. And lastly, we have a weather cat department. And again, not just for the property adjusters, you can search for historical weather information. And as a liability or auto adjuster, that can be helpful for things like a car accident or a slip and fall. You might want to know, what were the road conditions at that time? Was it raining? Was it icy? Was there snow on the ground? Those are some things that might give you, in terms of determining liability or negligence. Were they driving too fast? Did they fail to take some kind of precaution? And you can go back and check out what the weather was on a particular date of loss. So that is our kind of overview of the big picture. And so now I'm going to pass things over to Pat Biggins, and Pat is going to go to our website and demonstrate where to find a lot of these coverage/legal materials.
Thank you, Jeff. As Jeff said, my name is Pat Biggins. I'm a liability coverage attorney here with PLRB, and I want to kind of walk you through some of the things within this database on our website and how to access these materials, show you kind of what they look like. So when you see these things, you know what you're looking at. And I'd like to start with, Jeff mentioned these case law reviews, and we're going to take a look at those. They show up first. As Jeff said, we review hundreds and hundreds of these new cases when they come down, and they're added to the searchable database. But they show up first usually on the home page here. You'll see property legal updates here and then liability legal updates. And we're going to look at one of these. We're just going to click on this one that says California stacking of coverage is not allowed. And you'll see this takes us to a law review, a summary of a case that came down. And in this case, the insured, it's Progressive Select Insurance versus McKinley. Here, the insured obtained a personal auto policy while a resident of California, but then moved to South Carolina without informing the insurer. The insured was involved in an accident in South Carolina where the insured's vehicle was struck by an uninsured drunk driver. So the insured attempted to stack coverages on the 4 vehicles on his policy as permitted in South Carolina where this accident occurred. But unlike South Carolina law, the insured was not allowed to stack coverages under California law, and I'm sure the premiums paid by the insured reflected that. The court examines this and says the policy was issued in California. California law controls, and I went through a whole long analysis, but ultimately the insured was unable to stack these coverages from the different vehicles. Jeff mentioned that a lot of times we are able to provide a link to the original opinion, and sometimes they can be quite lengthy. And so our counsel will just kind of shrink these things down to the most important points. The in brief section tells you exactly what the court held in the case. The facts will describe all the relevant facts in the case, policy language, what happened at each level of court treatment of it, and then the rationale used by the court to reach their conclusion. And again, these are added to the searchable database, to the policy annotations, which we'll discuss in a minute. I want to show you how, so these appear on the homepage first, but sometimes you want to run a search to find these kinds of materials. So I'd like to show you how to do that. But let's start with like kind of a hypothetical example. So let's say you need to find out if an assault and battery exclusion in a bar owner's CGL policy will preclude coverage for a shooting of a bar patron by another patron in a downtown club in the state of Illinois. So we'd go to coverage research here and hover over coverage research. I always try to click on it, but you hover over it and you select PLRB search powered by Coveo. Coveo is a lot like Google. We used to use a Google search and they stopped supporting it for these applications. So Coveo is the next closest thing and it does a really, really good job. So you'll see this kind of Coveo search page. And we said that we were concerned about the assault and battery exclusions. So I'll type words like assault, battery, key kind of policy terms. And then I can hit search right here, or I can check case law and limit our hits to things. We don't need to see Q&As or training materials. We just want to see case law. And then we said we were in Illinois, so we can come down here and find the Illinois box and check that box. You can do that before you run the search or after. And it should narrow us down to just not so many hits. And they should all be case law hits. And we see this hit called Kinsale Insurance Company versus Last Coast Entertainment. And again, we can tell looking at this, this is one of those law review documents like we were just talking about. And in this case, CGL policies assault and battery exclusion barred coverage for shootings at the insured nightclub. Although the underlying complaint alleged inadequate security, the all-encompassing scope of the assault and battery exclusion expressly extended to the failure to provide an environment safe from any harmful or offensive conduct, and thus the exclusion was triggered. So we did here is we went to the jurisdiction, used our keywords to find information about this particular exclusion, and here we've got a real recent case that says this exclusion is going to be enforced in similar circumstances in this state. Okay, so that's an example of a case law search. Let's do another one. Let's go back to the home page so we can go through this again. So coverage research, hover there, PLRB search powered by Coveo. Let's say this time you need to know if you have to pay title and registration fees in a claim based on the total loss of a vehicle in the state of Florida. So we'll search using terms like title, registration, because this is what we are trying to find out about. It's a total loss. Hit search. And you'll see we're getting some North Carolina hits, Arkansas. We said we're looking for case law, so we can check that box. We can come down here and check the box for the state of Florida. And we get narrowed down to just one hit here, and it's Pisonga versus Progressive Select Insurance Company. Click on that. Here's another case review. In this case, the court says an insured did not have to pay the title, registration, or license plate fees for a total vehicle. The policy required the insured to pay the actual cash value, which was determined solely by the market value, age, and condition of the vehicle. So there's a complete answer from the jurisdiction that says no, the insured is not obligated to pay any of these fees beyond the ACV of the vehicle. Okay, so those are case law reviews. Some of them could be a little bit more complicated than those. Those are pretty simple, but they're easy to understand, and you get the idea of what a case law review looks like. Now what I'd like to talk to you about is the policy annotations that Jeff mentioned. And those are like the paragraphs or discussions, chapters that include case law discussions of one section or clause in the policy. So, and we have these available for homeowners, personal auto, business auto, garage, CGL, all these forms. So let's do an example search that will find us a policy annotation. So let's say we need to know if the executor of the insured's estate is covered while using an insured's vehicle to go to different banks and settle accounts after the death of the insured. So there's a clause in the policy, and again, we're going to do this search by Coveo, that talks about assignment of the rights under the policy, transfer of rights, and it also discusses the death of the insured. So we'll throw those search terms in there, hit submit, and we see this PA 100. That's a chapter or a key number of a policy annotation. It tells you it's a personal auto policy annotation. It's the one that talks about assignment, transfer, death. Now we could have come down here and selected auto-related policy annotations and limited our hits to just that, but we get the same first hit, assignment, transfer, death of insured. And if we examine this, it says, well, first of all, the policy language, if we scroll down here, it says that there's coverage will be provided for the legal representative of the deceased person as if a named insured shown on the decks. But this applies only with respect to the representative's legal responsibility to maintain or use your covered auto. So it's a very, very fine grant of coverage. If we scroll down through the discussion, we'll see that coverage for legal representative, there's only a few cases where this has come up and are discussed in the case law. But in each one, they're trying to find coverage for somebody, and the person might be a legal representative, but the person using the vehicle wasn't the representative, or the person was the representative, but they weren't using it in the affairs of the person's estate. And the courts all consistently held that when you have this narrow grant of coverage, it's got to fall within that grant. Otherwise, there would not be coverage under the policy. So that's what a policy annotation looks like. Again, it's kind of a case law discussion of a particular clause within the policy. Let's find another one. We're back here at the Coveo search page. This time, let's say you need to know if the homeowner's watercraft exclusion applies to a wave runner with a 125 horsepower engine that's owned by your insured and is involved in an accident on the lake. So we're going to put in terms like watercraft. And these terms, because they're key policy terms, they tend to limit the results you'll get. For example, there's no watercraft exclusion in the personal auto policy. So it's obviously going to take you to homeowners documents, but you could select homeowners using the collection type on the left. Our other term was wave runner. And let's just run a search. Oh, and see here, we get no hits. Why? It says collection type here, auto-related policy. We're still in auto policy. So we'll uncheck that box and say, okay, let's look at HO annotation. And we'll see this hit for the annotation of the watercraft exclusion in the homeowners policy, HO 607, watercraft. So this is a discussion of just this watercraft exclusion. And for those of you familiar with this homeowners policy exclusion, it gets into how many horsepower, whether it's so many feet long, and so on and so forth. And if you scroll down far enough in the document, there's a section that talks about which ones are excluded, which ones aren't. Here it says standard ISO watercraft exclusion precluded coverage for a wave runner. And here in our example, it was over 50 horsepower and had a jet drive or propulsion. And so therefore the exclusion would have applied here. So again, this is just a homeowner's policy annotation. It discusses specifically this exclusion. And we just used some search terms that appear in the exclusion, and then a factual term like wave runner that was read out of our claim. Okay, so those are policy annotations. I want to do one more here. Let's say we need to know if liability for damage arising from the insured's car wash at his garage location arose out of his garage operations. In other words, is the operation of the car wash necessary or incidental to the insured's garage operations? So we run the same kind of search. We're here in the Coveo search homepage, and incidental is right out of the garage policy, and garage operations is a defined term in the policy. Hit search. We're getting HO hits here. So again, we go over to the collection type, uncheck HO. We should have done this before we ran the search, but we'll see here's GR 117, garage operations defined. This is the annotation of the definition of garage operations in the policy. And under the definition, it says, the term garage operations also includes operations necessary or incidental to a garage business. So things like changing oil might be necessary to the business, or incidental towing might be. But what about a car wash? If we scroll down in the annotation here, we see a section about necessary or incidental. And there's actually a case a few years ago, Illinois, where the court held that a service station's car wash was necessary or incidental to the service station's garage operations. Kind of makes sense, doesn't it? The car wash is related to or incidental to the garage operations. Well, what if we were talking about the sale of shotgun shells? There's a case on that one too, and it says, no, the sale of shotgun shells is just a little bit outside this necessary or incidental to the front end of the garage business. Okay, so those are policy annotations. Next, what I'd like to show you are the emerging issues that Jeff mentioned, kind of those hot topics that have been coming up, and we have materials that address them. From the homepage, we're going to hover over coverage research. We're going to go to this search powered by Coveo. And this time, instead of running a search, we're going to go to the table of contents here at the top of this page and click on table of contents. And then the first item under this list in the table is emerging issues. So we're going to go ahead and click on that and open the emerging issues folder. And you'll see a list of all these topics that are what we call emerging or interesting or new. And you have things such as like Airbnb and homeowners Section 2 liability coverage. This one addresses homeowners coverage for rental of a home or a second home. It addresses the business exclusion as well as the occasional rental exception. We're seeing more and more of these claims arising out of the rental of the home and how the policy language would apply here. Other ones are like alternative litigation funding. There's information about the sources of this outside funding and the goals associated with these kinds of cases. It's a growing area of concern in the industry, so you can have a look at that if you run into that issue. Jeff mentioned coronavirus. You see there's a first party emerging issue hit here, and there's also a third party discussion. And this addresses issues under several different lines with respect to an insured's potential liability for transmission of the virus to a third party claimant. And it also addresses what exclusions might apply. And we'll go back to the list just to highlight a few more. Does a personal auto policy provide coverage for delivery drivers using personal vehicles with the emergence of ride-sharing services like Uber, Lyft, Grubhub? So here's a fairly comprehensive treatment of the case law that we have so far around the country and how this exclusions in the auto policies have applied in the different kind of either driving or delivery services. E-scooter turmoil, Jeff mentioned that one, I believe, during the PowerPoint part. Are you covered? We've all seen these scooters lying around in downtown areas and college campuses, and there's a couple different lines potentially implicated, and it discusses how these e-scooters and e-bikes, how coverage might apply under the different policies. You can look at these and see if there's any of interest to you. I'd like to mention one more, the reptile theory. A lot of us have been hearing more and more about the reptile theory. This describes what it is, why it has resulted in high dollar settlements and jury verdicts, and also some suggestions as to how to combat this theory. Okay, so those are emerging issues. And again, just real quick, let's go back and show you. From the home page, we want coverage research, Caveo page, then table of contents, and then emerging issues, and that's where we find them. Okay. I'd like to show you state-by-state materials, and let's do this again. Home page, Caveo page. We're going to use the table of contents again, but this time instead of emerging, we're going to go down to state-by-state and open this list. So here's a list of just tons and tons of different state-by-state materials where we've taken the topic and we've tried to do a 50-state treatment. Not all states will have information about this, but to the extent they do, we've collected them here for all these topics. Jeff mentioned the anti-indemnity statutes. We've got that discussion here for all 50 states. Auto diminished value coverages. This has started to be a big deal a few years ago. So-and-so has their car repaired, but there's the element of perhaps stigma damages associated with the fact that it's been in an accident, so it has diminished overall value. Does the coverage extend to that? Well, here, if we went to Georgia, you see there's this Mabry case that says, yes, the insurer is going to be on the hook for that. So depending on what state your loss arises in, that might be something that you'd like to know. There's an auto law compendium, auto total loss and salvage recovery. Talks about the threshold for total loss in each state. And let's see, a few more bad faith in the absence of coverage. There's a casualty construction defect 50-state discussion. Consent judgments, crash tax. This is where the municipalities try to charge or at least recover for emergency police and fire services after an accident. Distracted driver and cell phone texting laws. Got that one in here. Duty to defend, duty to disclose policy limits, duty to settle. Material misrepresentation. What happens when the insured misrepresents facts that cause the insured to issue a policy? And can the insurer void the policy after they discover the misrepresentation? And what about if there's third-party injury or damage? And at that point, the insurer tries to rescind the policy. And we've got that discussion here for all 50 states. There's also a rental car coverages compendium, all 50 states. Your insured goes to Florida, rents a car. What's the dangerous instrumentality doctrine? And can the rental company shift the responsibility to provide primary coverage onto the renter? So we've got the 50-state treatment of rental car coverage. So there's just tons of these. We can't click on every single one. I'd just like to show you one more UM/UIM compendium. So we've set forth the statute and all of the different issues that arise under uninsured motorists. My favorite one to show off is, like, let's say we're in Iowa and you want to know, okay, is there a workers' compensation offset against the UM coverage? Well, you go right to the section, are there offsets for MedPay, work comp, or no fault? go down and find workers' compensation. And in Iowa, they say this is an issue to be determined in accordance with the provisions of the policy. So in Iowa, there is no hard and fast rule. It would be, what does the policy say? So that could be very, very handy. And now, we have adjusters that handle auto claims in many different states now. So this can be very, very helpful information, save you a lot of time. Okay, I mentioned, I think that there were two ways to reach these materials. Let's do a quick example. Let's say we were looking for what's the burden of proof for late notice in Ohio. We could click on this state-by-state discussion of late notice of occurrence, and we could go down and we could find the Ohio late notice discussion, and it'll talk about timeliness and whether insurance prejudice is required and so on, and then there should be a section about burden of proof. In Ohio, late notice relieves an insurer of its obligation only if the insurer has suffered prejudice, and here's the standard. Unreasonable delay in giving notice to an insurer is presumed to prejudice the insurer in the absence of any evidence to the contrary. Once the unreasonable delay has been demonstrated by the insurer, the burden rests with the claimant to show the absence of prejudice to the insurer. So there's the Ohio standard. So let's find another way to get here. From the home page, we could hover on coverage research, and instead of going to the Coveo search and searching on that, or going to the table of contents and working our way down there, we could click on state annotations. And this is true for any of these discussions. And this will take us to this little map. So if we're only concerned about Ohio, we could click on, and I use Ohio because it's a big state, it's easy to click on. And that'll take us to all these same state-by-state discussions. We were talking about late notice. And here's the same discussion that we talked about. Here's the burden of proof section that I just showed you. Let me do that one more time because that goes quickly. People say that that's too fast. Again, we were on the home page, hovered on coverage research, went to state annotations, and then from the map, pick our state, and then our topic. Okay, next I'd like to show you some FAQs. So from the home page, we're going to go back to the search powered by Coveo, back to our table of contents, and then we're going to look at FAQs. These are just frequently asked questions where we've done a write-up or found a white paper to add to the database so you can get more information on these kind of nuanced topics. Additional insureds, what are latest cases that discuss that status, pollution exclusion in Chinese drywall, auto black box or event data recorders, employment practices, where's that CGL coverage for employment practices liability claims. If you run into this kind of issue, this can be very, very helpful. Coverage for trade dress or trademark infringement under liability policies, that can be real thorny, and this can help you get through those kinds of claims. Data breach, faulty workmanship, Medicare reporting, offsetting workers' comp benefits under auto policies, and on and on. So those are liability FAQs, just kind of wanted to show you what those look like. Okay, Jeff mentioned that we answer coverage questions for our member insurance companies all throughout the year, and we add some of these to the searchable database if we think that it would be helpful down the road or contains information or case law that we researched. So I'd like to show you how to get to one of those. If we went to the search by Coveo, there's one that we did last year that involved, under an auto policy, there was a semi-accident, and the semi caught on fire. It was a total loss, and the question was whether the cleanup of the diesel fuel was a covered pollution loss or expense. So if we put in words like cleanup, diesel, and a semi, it should take us right to it. Okay, this is the one we were looking for. Now, we could have limited this by clicking coverage questions if we only wanted to find coverage questions on this topic, but this is what one of them looks like. It comes in, the facts come in, insured semi-tractor caught fire. They paid to total the loss and paid for towing. And on the day of the accident, there was this environmental cleanup company that offered to clean it up. They ended up getting a bill for over $200,000, and they want to know, okay, does this cleanup cost coverage apply? Because the language is a little bit scary. It says you have to have covered property damage in order for it to apply. So we took a good look at the policy language, and then we did a little research and discussed the case law and so forth. And we provided an answer to the question that says that the policy did afford coverage for this covered pollution cost or expense if there's property damage to which the insurance applies. And here, because there was property damage to the ground, to the environment there, the coverage applied. So that's what a coverage question looks like after it's written up and added to the database. And again, they are searchable, but they always say some kind of coverage question at the top of the document here. Okay. If you would like to ask us a coverage question, there's a couple of ways you can submit them. From the home page, there's always like a banner that says Ask Now, and you can click on that, and it'll take you to the coverage question page. Or under coverage research, you can ask a coverage question there by clicking on hover over coverage research and ask a coverage question. Or from the Coveo page at the top, there's a line that says Ask a coverage question at the top of the document there. No matter which way you go to get there, you end up on this page, which is the coverage question submission page. Property questions are on the left side. Today we're talking about liability and auto, so if it's homeowners, farm owners, commercial, any of these kind of liability coverage issues, you click over here where it says here, and that takes you to first you have to confirm that's you. Yes, this is me, Patrick Biggins. Your profile, yes. You see any mistakes in the contact information, you can correct those right there. Yes, my profile. Here's the coverage question kind of submission form. You can select a policy form from the drop-down box. You can select a file and attach it. You can enter the policy name. If you just put in the policy number of any ISO form, we have access to all those forms. Please put in the state of loss. It can be a huge difference whether the claim arose in Alabama or Hawaii, so please fill that in. You can copy and paste the specific policy language that's giving you the trouble right there. Relevant facts, you can copy and paste those from your file notes so that we know what's going on with the claim. Then you ask your question and hit submit, and it will immediately assign your question to one of the coverage attorneys in the office, and you will get a response in 2 to 5 business days, or you will hear from us, and we'll tell you what information we're missing so we can provide that answer. I believe you also get an email that confirms what the question says and also who it was assigned to. And again, 2 to 5 business days later, you have your answer. Okay, that's all that I have, but Jeff mentioned that I would show you where you can register for continuing education. From the home page, if you hover over education and you go to modules, and then you see these CE approved modules, here's kind of a grid that tells you what the titles of these are, what kind of module they are, what kind of credit you can get. There's CE credit. There's even attorney CLE credit in some states for some of these. So that's one way. You can also register for live events. There's a calendar that'll tell you upcoming events, and you can register for those. And that's all under this education tab or the live event tab. Okay, that's all for me. Jeff, if you'd like to jump in. If you
Sure.
think I missed anything, we can talk about that, or we can go right to questions, whatever you think.
One other thing that I would show, just because you're on this page, is under education, if you mouse over education and then to webinars. And then at the bottom, there is a very bottom PLRB services overview. Yes, click on that.
Okay.
So for anybody who wanted to find out about some of the other departments, I mentioned we were doing a monthly get to know PLRB highlighting each department. So this webinar today is being recorded and will be available for people who missed it. But for those of you who missed previous month's webinars, these are where they are located. So the first one is an overview of all of our products and services, and then as you can see, we have one on coverage, we have one on building codes, we have one on training and education offerings, and then weather catastrophe. So lots of things to cover. We can't cover it all in just one webinar. So if you want to learn more, or you have coworkers who missed this one today, this webinar will be located here as well in about a week or so after we've formatted it and loaded it to the database. So with that, let's go to our behind the scenes folks. Brennan, do we have some questions that people sent during the webinar?
Yes, we do. If you want to join me on webcam, we'll start the Q&A here. And we have some questions still coming in. Hey, Pat.
How are we doing?
Our first question is from Craig. Is the form review service that you discussed earlier, is that a free service or is there a charge for it?
It is free. Everything that we go over is part of your membership, and you have unlimited access to everything that we demonstrated. Again, unlike typical service providers in the insurance industry, we are nonprofit. So our goal truly is to serve our members, and there's no secret hidden costs. whatsoever. And on top of which, when your company pays its annual dues, your actual usage does not in any way increase your company's dues in future years. It's solely based on the size of your company. So if you have form reviews that you want us to take a look at, send them our way. We'd be happy to take a crack at them.
All right, thanks, Jeff. Our next question comes from Lisa. Are there CGL annotations? I guess on the search screen, she could see auto and HO, but not homeowners, but not CGL.
Yes, there are CGL annotations. I don't know if we hit on one, but yes, and usually your search terms will kind of just direct you to those policies, because if you use, like I like to say, key policy terms when you run a search, it's going to take you to the policy. But we can run one if you'd like, or we can. You can call me privately if you'd like after the session. We can run.
Why don't
definitely.
Instead of doing a full search, just click on coverage research Coveo.
Okay. I can still see my screen, right? Coverage research.
Yep, we can still see your
Coveo.
screen. So that takes us from coverage page. Yep, table of contents.
And these are kind of lumped together with other commercial policies, but commercial general policy annotations, you can look at all the list of keys, or you can go right to the policy language. Commercial general liability coverage form, let's look at the 1207 form, and you'll see here's a list of them. Let's say we wanted to know about the duty to defend.
Wait, before you click on anything,
okay.
Just because I've jumped ahead, this is related to another question we got. So do you see where these blue links are that say, GL36 and GL37? Someone questioned, what do those things mean? So if you could explain, what are those forms, or what are those? What's that nomenclature?
What these signify is how much of the text appears in the annotation. So for example, we see this GL36 is right after the word applies. This section right here will be discussed in key GL36. Beyond that, let's say you look at a specific exclusion, expected or intended injury exclusion. Key GL71 will discuss just this exclusion.
So GL71 is not a form?
Nope, it is a link to one of the policy annotations, specifically the expected or intended injury exclusion under the GL policy. And I'm going to go ahead and click on it once, and it'll take you right. So this is what it looks like, the annotations that we looked at under homeowners and other ones. This one is just on the expected or intended injury. It'll tell you the policy language. And then if you scroll down from there, under the different forms, it'll give you a general description, gets into the definitions, and then just a long, long case law discussion of just that exclusion under this policy.
So if you see something that says HO with a couple of numbers after it, or GL or CA, the first two letters are just simply telling you what policy annotation is involved. So in this case, it is GL, so it's a CGL annotation. HO would be a homeowner's annotation. And the number that follows is simply the chapter number. It is not some odd form that you've never heard of the GL36 form. It's simply, we call them keys. If you see often it says the word key in front. A key is just our word for it's a chapter.
All right, so we'll go to our next question. Thanks for that detailed answer. You hit two in a row there. This question comes from Juan, and we may direct him to our weather folks, but let's see. His question is, where does the weather data come from? Can we be assured it is accurate as possible? Do you know that, or should we direct him to our weather folks?
The bulk of the weather information comes from the National Weather Service. What we do, unlike the National Weather Service, is we have people on staff who archive everything. They are literally up at 5 in the morning, loading everything. So by 9 a.m., pretty much anything that happened the day before is already in our database, and we put it in searchable formats. So it's hard when you go to the National Weather Service to try and find things that happened a week ago, let alone 6 months ago. We are able to much better capture that information, and we can put it in mapping formats and other ways that are easier to digest. So the bulk of our information comes from National Weather Service.
All right, great. Our next question, I think our audience is having trouble believing that this is all for free, but is there a fee for the webinars under education? and for CE credits?
There are yeah, truly, that's why we're a nonprofit, folks. Our board of directors, who we report to, they are all CEOs and VPs of claims departments of our member companies. So no, we truly are in this just to help out our membership. That is what we exist for. All of our modules, all of our webinars, all of our conferences, they are all free for members to attend. There's no limit. You can have every claims adjuster in your company, listen in or attend. There is never a fee. And Brennan is in the education department. So do you have anything else to add about that?
Yes, I can clarify that some of our live webinars are available for CE credit. You just have to check each individual webinar to see what states they're approved in. But when the webinars are loaded onto their website, they're available for viewing for training purposes, but don't get CE credit there. And then our CE on-demand courses are also available on the website. And yeah, again, there's no fee for any of that. But maybe we can clarify and jump down to I have a question from Denise and John asking about limitations for affiliate members. Everything we just talked about is related to members of PLRB insurance company members. But does an affiliate member have the same access?
No. And I just want to, before I jump on that, I just want to add one other thing about the CE stuff. PLRB does the paperwork. So if you take a webinar or a class, once you provide us with the information of who you are and that we know that you took it, we reach out to the Department of Insurance and send them the necessary information so that they know that you took the class so you can get your CE. As far as affiliate members, for those of you who might not be familiar with the term, those are for service providers. It's a membership solely for service providers. It's not for insurance companies. They have much limited access to specifically the legal materials. So I'd be happy to talk to anyone that is an affiliate member, and I can give you more information if you reach out to me or call our main number, 888-711-7572. I'll show that at the very end with that number again. But affiliate members do have access to the building code, weather catastrophe information, and training and education services. But the legal materials that we went over mostly today, they have very limited access to. And I can clarify that if they want to reach out to me.
All right, great. We have another question here from Grace. He wants to know if there's any resources on road construction codes and duties, and we can get back to her if we need to, but are you aware of any of those offhand?
Well, I don't know the specifics. It depends on the state. I would imagine that there could be. In terms of duties, that would fall more under the liability department, I would think, not building code. But in terms of construction, there might be things for bridges and things like that there could be building code requirements. And if you go to our building code page, which is on the home page, you can simply reach out to them and submit a question. It says there you go, yep, coverage research down to building code, which is the second to the bottom. And then there's that yellow tab, which allows you to submit your question to our building code department. So it will depend on obviously what jurisdiction you're in, because some states only have one building code for the whole state and others have a separate building code for each and every municipality. Any other questions?
We just have a couple more. Alice would like to know what states we are approved for CE in. We don't have CE for all the states. We have them for some. And you can find that under Education CE modules. And we had a quick question about the broker community. I'm not aware if they can hop on to any of these webinars.
I don't believe so. I don't believe that they are eligible for that. Typically, it is just for, it's generally not designed for agencies or brokers, but rather on the claims handling side.
Okay.
Independent adjusters do have access, though.
And we might have one last question here. Grace would like to know, where do I find the commercial and personal auto policy annotations? You could go over that.
Before we jump to that, what Pat is showing here is
Oh, yes, thanks.
the chart of states where there is CE certification, and we have based our modules on Texas in terms of CE credits, because Texas, we find, is the strictest of all the states. Our modules, I believe, are pretty much all 2 hours long. There are chunked out into 15-minute segments with quiz questions at the end of every 15 minutes. You have to pass a certain number of quiz questions. I believe it's 4 out of 5. If you actually listen to the webinar, you will be able to answer the quiz questions. We're not trying to trick you. But we find that there are a lot of states that have reciprocity. And so often, if you're in a state where you need CE, you can often still get it by demonstrating that this is approved in one of these listed states. So with that, why don't you repeat the question one more time, and then Pat can probably better navigate and show what you were asking for.
Perfect. We're looking for commercial and personal auto policy annotations.
Again, well, let me start at the homepage. From the homepage, let's do this. If you hover on coverage research, go to search powered by Coveo, and then go to the table of contents. If you wanted to see, well, under the contents auto-related policies, we'll show you the business auto policy annotations, personal auto policy. Let's look at business, because I don't think we talked about these specifically. And let's say you wanted to see the policy language. You could click on this 0310 form, and here's the kind of same idea of here's the form, here's the actual chapter or key numbers for each section of the policy. And for more information about each section, you would just click on the corresponding key number. But yeah, you could, from the table of contents, auto-related policies, and then select your policy.
And I'll just add that our forms are based on ISO, or annotations, I should say, policy annotations are based on ISO forms, but that doesn't mean that the cases discussed are exclusively ISO. So if you don't write specifically ISO, you can still find lots of cases. We just use the ISO form as kind of the skeleton of our annotations, and then you can go to a related definition, and even though it may not be the identical definition found in your form, you'll find cases with all different policy language discussed in that chapter.
All right, I think we've come to the end of our questions. If we get any more questions, we'll be happy to answer them by email, but I'll turn it back over to you now, Jeff.
All right, thanks so much. I just want to thank everyone for attending, and I just want you to know that we have different ways that we reach out to our membership. Besides this monthly webinar series, we have classes at live conferences, and we haven't had any since COVID in a year and a half, but we do have one coming up in Columbus in September, another one in Tampa. I believe that's in either October or November, and our claims conference will be in San Antonio in, I believe, March or April of next year. So we do have classes there where you can take to learn more about how to navigate our website. I already showed you how you can access our other monthly webinars on Get to Know PLRB, so those are available 24/7. If you have a company where you think you'd really like to get the word out to your folks, we can work with you to create a live webinar like this one just for your folks. And then we do have a presence on social media. If you don't have front lines already, you should make sure you sign up on our website when you get your username and password, and there's unlimited number of people from a member company. In other words, every single person at your company can have a PLRB username and password, and we highly recommend everyone get their own and don't share it, because if you want to get CE credit or register for a webinar or submit a coverage question, if you're sharing passwords, we won't know who submitted the question or who signed up. We'll just think it's always from the person who you borrowed the password from. So there's no limit, there's no cost. Once you're a member, everyone can have their own password. It's got to be from a recognized company email domain, but other than that. And then once you sign up with your own PLRB password, which you can do at www.plrb.org, our homepage, you, I believe, automatically are signed up for our weekly Frontlines, which is our weekly email blast. And that will tell you what the newest cases are, the newest regulations, the newest everything else, bulletins, upcoming webinars. So it's really a great way of keeping in touch with what's going on in the insurance industry and PLRB. And then lastly, we do have a phone number here listed at the bottom of the screen, 888-711-7572. That's our main number. And so whether it's a question that's a coverage question, or you just need help navigating the coverage database or any of our other resources, just call that number and someone will pick up the phone, and you don't need an appointment. You can just call us and we can spend 5 minutes talking to you on the phone, helping you navigate where you need to go. So it's all part of your membership. We truly do enjoy working with our members, and we look forward to helping you out in the future. So thanks everyone for attending today, and stay healthy.